Hello, I'm Nate and welcome to Vintage Rails. So, with this video, I'm at another railroad museum. Another one of my favorites. The Lomita Railroad Museum in Lomita, California. We're going to take another look at this place. I did one look at the museum a while ago, actually as one of my first videos. So we're going to take a look inside and see what they have in their collection. Also meet a friend or two. The Lomita Railroad Museum is a little bit small, but it still has its own things about it that are still interesting. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Nate. How are you doing today?
Fine. Anyhow, so I already know this gentleman right here. You might have seen him from some of my SCLS videos, however you have not been introduced to him. So, would you please take us on a tour of the inside of the building?
Can do. My name is Alex. I've been working at the Lomita Railroad Museum now for a little under a year. I have been volunteering for even more than that. We can come inside and take a little tour.
Now, what's the history of this place before we get started here?
Well, the Lomita Railroad Museum was founded in 1967 by Miss Irene Lewis. Miss Lewis was an avid enthusiast of what's called live steam. For those viewers of the channel, you probably already know what that is. Live steam locomotives, of course, were trains, but at a smaller scale. They were still real. They burned fuel. That fuel would then heat up water. That water would then create steam, just on a much smaller scale. Now, Miss Lewis and her husband, Martin Lewis, owned a company called Little Engines. What Little Engines did is they produced kits. These kits, we have a few of them assembled here, like these ones over here. This is our 3000. These kits would be assembled by people who would purchase them, and they would be built up over a number of years, and you could have your own steam locomotive. You could run these around in clubs or like SCLS, or even in your own home if you had the space. But what their company did was provide the resources for people to get started in the hobby without spending, let's say, 30 years designing and patenting and building their own steam engine. SCLS was actually used to be hosted here. We actually have a poster up there that shows a club activity, run day that they had. Miss Lewis is over on the right. She's also one of the only females in this poster here. We have this nice display set up underneath this to commemorate her and her husband. Her husband was actually a driving factor in what got her into railroading, as well as live steam. We also have one of her dresses here, like you saw in the photo. She would come down here, and this was actually built where her house used to be, in the parking lot actually. Her house used to be right out there.
We'll get to that in a minute.
And the club, the SCLS, the Southern California Live Steamers, was in the grass field. She also had a factory in the grass field. That's where she manufactured and produced all of her kits. Using the money she made from building those kits, she was able to build the museum, and she was able to collect all of these fine assortments of artifacts in here. This right here is Lulu. Most of these, we have two engines in here that are set up on rollers. One of them is currently not working. That was 3000. But Lulu here is a pretty good hit with the kids. You take a dime and you put it inside the slot here. And the kids are able to see how the valve gear and pistons would work on a steam engine.
And now we are looking at one of the, or actually the biggest and most interesting artifact here.
This is our pride and joy here at the Lomita Railroad Museum. This is Southern Pacific number 1765. She is a 260 mogul type steam locomotive. That means she has 2 leading wheels, 6 driving wheels, and 0 trailing wheels. She was built in 1901 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, December of 1901 in fact. This means that she is a little over 120 years old as of a few months ago.
This is being filmed in February of 2022, just to let you guys know.
This engine was shipped to Southern Pacific, and it was used for quite a while in the Los Angeles area, up and down the West Coast. During World War II, it was loaned to the Pacific Electric Railroad Company, and they used it for some of their light freight duties. It was used as a helper locomotive in order to get heavier trains up mountains, and it also pulled the occasional local freight or local passenger train. The last records that we have of it being operated was in 1965, I believe. Is that correct?
The photos I have are like 1957.
1957.
Yes.
A little rusty, it's been a few months. 1957, there was a railfan excursion done by the Southern Pacific in which this and another steam locomotive,
Number 2248.
double-headed with another diesel, and they led a railfan excursion. That was the last time that we know of that this engine operated.
And the last time steam on the Southern Pacific operated in Southern California specifically.
So this is a piece of Southern California history for you all.
And 2248, which was in front of this locomotive on the excursion, is currently at the Grapevine Vintage Railroad in Texas. It's under overhaul and storage, as far as I know.
I'm standing in front of here our 1910 Union Pacific Caboose. Usually you'd be used to it being a little red caboose, but ours is actually yellow because it did work for the Union Pacific. Being built in 1910 also means that it's made almost entirely out of wood. Besides the frame, the handrails, and the wheels, this was made almost entirely out of wood. Very little is known about this caboose, where it operated. Nate, if you'd like to chime in.
Well, it does have markings that say Oregon-Washington Railway Navigation Company on it, which was a subsidiary of Union Pacific, but I don't know much about this either, so.
What we do know, however, is that the Union Pacific found out that Miss Irene Lewis was in fact building this museum here, and they wanted to do something for it. So, they actually donated this caboose to her. It was actually presented to her as a Christmas present. There was a big red bow wrapped around the entire thing, and Santa Claus was there in order to present it to her. She went down to a rail yard. We actually have some pretty cool pictures of that Nate might be showing on screen currently if he finds the time to do it. And they presented it to her as a Christmas present, and that's always something really fun to bring up when talking to it about the kid, talking to it with like kids and things like that. Welcome to the inside of our 1910 Union Pacific Caboose. It's a little rustic in here, as you can tell. A lot of these cushions and things weren't the originals. This is where we hold our story times on Thursdays. We have our brakeman over here. He's dressed up in a Western Pacific brakeman's uniform. The brakeman would be responsible for all of the brakes on the trains, although later on he was mostly an assistant to the conductor. Due to this caboose not having running water, of course there was no AC available either, so you'd have to actually put a giant cube of ice inside of one of these. This is known as an ice box.
Yep, before refrigerators.
Water that was melted from the ice would drain down through a hole in the floor and would just go straight down to the tracks. That is where you would keep your provisions and other things for living on the rails, because of course these were living spaces. The conductor, the brakeman, would have to live inside of these cars for hours or even days at a time according to what railroad or what train you were working on. Because there was also no running water, you just have to refill these huge tanks here. That's where you get your hand washing. And also,
Meanwhile, for the commode,
it's an unfortunate situation.
and now, on the other side of this nice grassy field from the museum is a Santa Fe Caboose, number 999531.
This caboose here was built in 1949 for the Santa Fe. 999 in its number represents the class of caboose. In fact, its sister caboose is over at SCLS,
which is number 999516.
That means this caboose was number 531. This, of course, is a bit more modern than our 1910 Union Pacific caboose. Right off the bat, inside of here, we can look up and actually see that we have two chairs up in the cupola. The cupola, of course, is the area where the brakeman or conductor could look over the top of his train and be able to see what was going on in front of him. Back here, we have all the luxuries of living in the 1950s. We have our own bathroom on board, which doesn't just drain out to the tracks below. having running water on a rail car is definitely a good feature.
It's a luxury.
It's a luxury. Back here we can also see the desk where they would have worked, doing paperwork, filing for different cargoes and things like that.
So that's it for the tour by my good friend Alex here. So I'm gonna go around myself
So
for a little bit
to give an accurate tour to you guys. See you later.
Now at this spot behind me is somewhat of an anomaly. So this piece of track here was where a Amtrak car used to be. I'm not sure what it was or what it was for. There's very few photos of it. And I'll show you what photos I do have of it. So this car was probably put here in the 1990s and removed soon afterwards. But I honestly don't have much information, and Alex doesn't either, so I really don't know. Now, across the street from the museum, we have this lovely little park set up with two pieces of equipment here. First, we have this, at least according to their website, a 1913 wooden steel frame boxcar. Wood siding, but steel frame. However, this car is in pretty rough shape, honestly. There's a decent amount of rot and what can be described as termite damage probably as well. And then over here is a Union Oil Company of California tank car. I would guess this was built sometime in the 1920s because it is all steel and is all the modern features, air brakes, knuckle couplers, and all that. So that's all for this video, and come by and visit Alex and some other people at the Lomita Railroad Museum. Support this place. This is one of the smaller museums around here. That is quite a gem, well, at least if you ask me. And yes, I am biased. So, thanks for watching this video, and if you like this video, check out some others and all those good YouTube stuff. Consider subscribing because I have more interesting things on the way. Don't worry. I haven't run out of ideas just yet. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, God bless.